Every year, Flushing Meadows echoes with the sounds of an annual ritual. And finally, the stage is set for America's premier tennis competition. USA Network presents the 1992 United States Open Tennis Championships. For last year's winners, it would be 2 weeks in defense of the crown. The 112th U.S. Open arrived with the usual array of subplots. Among them, could the 91 champions Monica Seles and Stefan Edberg display the mettle needed to ward off all challenges? Since winning the 91 Australian Open, Monica Seles had reached the finals of all 6 Grand Slam events she entered. Yet her arrival in New York was accompanied by whispers that she was slumping. Such a notion had been fueled by a trio of recent tour losses, but Seles began her defense of the Open crown determined to erase any doubts about her reign at the top of women's tennis. Early opponents like second-round foe Lisa Raymond were left paralyzed by the Seles arsenal. And Monica served notice early that her contemporaries would have to be in peak form if they expected to derail her quest for another U.S. Open title. Until 1991, Stefan Edberg was less than enamored with the sometimes raucous conditions at the National Tennis Center. But he arrived this year much fonder of Flushing Meadows, having won the title last year. These dynamic points versus Jakob Lasik in the second round were indicative of the effort Edberg would require were he to repeat as U.S. Open champion, a feat no male had accomplished since Yvonne Lendl in 1986 and 87. A quartet of young Americans would also be very much involved. Number 1 ranked Jim Courier, Wimbledon champion Andre Agassi, Michael Chang, and 1990 Open champion Pete Sampras rounded out a group looking to make history. An American win would meet a sweep of the Grand Slams of '92, something not done since 1938. Of the 4, it was Courier who was most sternly tested early. In round 1, he squared off against NCAA champion Alex O'Brien. And if O'Brien was awed by his stadium court debut, it was hardly detectable. He calmly won a solid first set, 6-4. With positively no desire to make headlines as a first-round victim, Courier shifted his game into overdrive and won sets 2 and 3 by dominating from where he feels most comfortable, the baseline. Trailing, but having already captured a set from the world's number 1 player, O'Brien might have considered the night a good showing and bowed out gracefully. But in set 4, he pushed for more. Courier shoved back, erased a 4-2 deficit, and ended O'Brien's night by taking the 4th set tiebreak. Courier was through to round 2, leaving O'Brien to ponder that elusive difference between those who struggled to reach the top and those already there. 4-time champion Martina Navratilova confidently strolled into her record 20th U.S. Open. A recent victory over Monica Seles made singles title number 5 seem within reach. Her 92 Open debut came under the lights versus former University of Florida star Sean Stafford, a qualifier ranked 160th. Stafford's play and exuberance belied her lowly rank, and she shocked Navratilova by winning the first set. In set 2, Martina steadied the nerves that had rocked her game early on. Form held true as she displayed some of the many traits that surely have her ticketed to the Hall of Fame. Navratilova surged to a set 2 wipeout and a 5-1 lead in the rubber set. But just 4 points shy of victory, Martina was stricken by the tentativeness that had invaded her game earlier. This Stafford return made it 5-5, and she flashed a grin that said upset in the making. The last laugh, though, would belong to Navratilova as she rallied to win the final 2 games of the match. This brush with disaster was averted, but in round 2, there would be a full-fledged collision. The early rounds of a Grand Slam tournament are inundated with talented young players with nothing to lose. lapse of concentration, even by a superstar like Martina Navratilova, could spell early exit. In the second round, Martina came face-to-face with a player who fit the description, and the scenario proved too hot for her to handle. 17-year-old Magdalena Maleva is the third and final Maleva sister to hit the pro circuit. And like her older siblings, she possesses ground strokes that can reduce a nervous former champion to a shadow of herself. The match closely mirrored Martina's first-round encounter as she dropped the opening set 6-4. In the middle stanza, Martina rebounded strongly, hurling a shutout at Maleva 6-love. With the bounce back in her step, Martina pushed the match into a third and deciding set. Rarely has the former champion looked so uncomfortable on the stadium court, with volleys that sat up begging to be put away and a psyche that grew more and more fragile as the match wore on. Navratilova finally arrived at a moment that ours match point against. Teary-eyed, Navratilova departed from the court where she had so often celebrated victory, her earliest U.S. Open exit since 1976. After the defeat, she acknowledged having felt the pressure and then chided a reporter who wanted to know why.
I mean, figure it out. Come on, do I have to spell it out for you? What has she got to lose and what have I got to lose? For her, it's the match of her life. For me, it's a second-round match in what could be possibly my last Grand Slam event. I mean, I don't know.
As Martina ran out of the picture at the '92 U.S. Open, other women were pushed to the fore. And if the torch of greatness can be passed, teenage star Jennifer Capriati came to the Open primed to finally reach full stride. After spending the first several months of '92 in a funk, attributed by many to normal teenage angst, the Capriati ship was now back on course, following an Olympic gold medal performance in Barcelona. The timing seemed perfect for her first Grand Slam title, and throughout her early round victories, she displayed the dazzling shot-making and tenacity that make her a fan favorite. Meanwhile, Wimbledon champion and number 2 seed Steffi Graf answered questions about her chronically ailing right shoulder by cruising through the first week without losing a set. Glamour girl Gabriella Sabatini remains a PR magnet among fans, but tennis experts barely mentioned her as someone to watch closely as this U.S. Open began. Strange for someone champion enough to win the event in 1990. Spain's Arantxa Sanchez Vicario would also bear watching. She seems to rebel in the rambunctious atmosphere of the U.S. Open, and the '89 French Open winner thirsts for another Grand Slam title. The first few days of men's action at the '92 Open were unusually calm, but that all changed with the arrival of Jimmy Connors on his 40th birthday. The mere sight of Connors in New York conjured up vivid memories of his dramatic run to the semifinals in 1991. Connors electrified the entire nation as few in his sport ever have, with the boisterous traits that have defined his career. Perseverance, guts, enthusiasm, and a very real love of the game. There were improbable comebacks replete with scintillating shot-making and 5-set battles. In 1991, Jimmy Connors won the heart of the U.S. Open without ever accepting a trophy. This year, before embarking on another quest for glory, Connors accepted best wishes from an old friend. But now, with so much focus on him, the question Jimmy had to face was, were fans expecting too much from him in '92?
I think it's a bit unfair for him to feel that way, to be honest with you. I mean, last year I did have a good run, but every time I go out there and play, I try to be my best, but they have to understand that I am 40 years old here and that I'm playing against guys that are half my age. But I will say that if I could do half what I did last year, that would be more than a pleasure for me this year.
Even prior to the start of the Open, Connors had been accorded royal treatment. His sponsored birthday bash at a plush New York hotel had kicked off the celebration. Helping to ring in Jimmy's 40th year were dignitaries like New York City Mayor David Dinkins. There were also a plethora of celebrities on hand.
You beat Jimmy in tennis?
But isn't it amazing? The guy that was the villain of the court, of the tennis courts for years, behavior-wise and everything, is now the grand old man. Everybody's rooting for the old man.
The evening's high point, though, came from the appearance of Jimmy's biggest fan, best friend, and first coach, his mother, Gloria.
Okay, but as your mother and your #1 fan, I wish you a very, very happy birthday.
Thank you. Stay up here.
No, you did, baby.
And so it began.
Here we go again. Yep.
In that charged air of electricity that Connors said was reminiscent of a decade ago when the great tennis rivalries were raging. The King took Stadium Court. It was a big party that left only one person feeling uninvited. Connors' opponent, 22-year-old Brazilian Jaime Ancine. As Ancine would discover, to beat Connors on a night this special is a challenge few players have ever met. Ancine did not come close. For Connors, it was his 114th career match at the U.S. Open, a record. And of course, it was vintage Jimbo throughout. First, he let his tennis take command, losing only 3 games in the first 2 sets. Then, with the match firmly in his control, Connors turned his attention to entertaining the masses. Even when Ancine hit a great shot, Connors stole the spotlight with a chuckle. Connors won in straight sets. When it was over, the old soldier thanked his adoring troops and looked ahead to round 2.
6-1, 6-2.
I never thought I'd be playing when I was 40. And it's really my pleasure to still be doing this, especially here for you people. You last year, actually every year since I played here, but more so last year and now tonight, have given me something that I cannot buy, and that's you coming day after day to watch me play. And I will never be able to repay you for that. I wish this cake was big enough so everybody could have a piece. But once again, you are the greatest, and I love playing here, and I'll see you Friday night.
Jimmy's date in round 2 would be Ivan Lendl, who was almost derailed prior to this marquee matchup by Peru's Jaime Izaga in a first-round match. Lendl-Izaga would prove to be an early indication of things to come. It developed into a lengthy battle of wills between a pair of players content to fire laser-like ground strokes from their respective baselines. Izaga was valiant, but Lendl met the challenge. It has been rare that his steely will is bested, and this would be no exception. It was just the first of many matches that went the distance. Lendl in 5. John McEnroe marched into Flushing Meadows incognito, but he had no intention of remaining unnoticed in this U.S. Open. While acknowledging that his 16th U.S. Open might be his last, Mac wanted to leave on a high note if this indeed was to be his swan song. In the first round, the 4-time champion met Michael Schoppers and easily brushed the Dutchman aside, in the process flashing the piercing volleys and deft touch that many of today's power players can only dream about. McEnroe in straight sets. The U.S. Open is the fourth and final Grand Slam event of the year, and for many, the most difficult 2 weeks to endure and win. Scant miles from Manhattan, the Open offers a potpourri of distractions that can sidetrack players. Even just getting to the National Tennis Center can be a supreme test. Things don't get much easier once on the premises. One of the biggest annoyances is noise, and it can arrive in a variety of forms.
Take seats, please. Players are waiting.
There are autograph hounds that swarm, or the occasional one that pops out of nowhere. Fans that trail you to your car, and the customary hecklers in the stands. There's the glut of press people, the rigors of nature, and plenty of excuses for losing your edge.
Europe is much better than States. For me, because first food is here, food is not good. If you eat those McDonald's cheeseburgers, hamburgers, you go to the hospital forever.
Some players like Jimmy Connors bask comfortably in the energetic conditions. Others need to adjust. One star who never seemed to handle the New York atmosphere was Stefan Edberg. But in 1991, he overcame all obstacles and captured the championship. For him, it was adjustment that made the difference.
And last year, I went in with an open mind. I changed my habits of staying on Long Island for the first time. I've always been in Manhattan before, which I think is very, very hectic, tough place to be, and you feel sort of stress all the time when you walk on the streets. That could have helped a little bit, and I just put everything together.
Perhaps the best advice you can give is to expect the unexpected.
Can we stop dropping the glass out of the window, please?
For Boris Becker, the unexpected came knocking on day 5 when tournament officials scheduled his second round encounter with Robbie Weiss on court 16, located on the periphery of the complex. It marked the first time in 34 career matches at the Open that Becker was not on the stadium or grandstand court, and the event drew a standing room only crowd. Unfortunately for the struggling German, the unfamiliar surroundings did little for his tennis game. In set number 1, everything seemed to rile Becker. Even the undermanned lines crew that worked the outer courts.
We need 2 calls. We need 2 men here. I mean, it's not a junior tournament. We need a couple more lines people. He cannot see that ball from there.
Weiss won the first set, and Becker seemed on the verge of self-destruction. But as the match wore on, it was the American who was paying the biggest price. Under excruciating heat and humidity, Weiss wilted and Becker pounced. The German won sets 2 and 3, while Weiss struggled to survive. Finally, early in the 4th, Weiss's body relented. He could go no further. As Becker left, he acknowledged the fans and waved goodbye, hopefully forever, to court 16. Becker was unscathed, but fellow countryman Michael Stich was not so fortunate in his second round endeavors against American Brad Gilbert. Together, the two combined to supply some of the tournament's most spirited play in a seesaw contest that lasted nearly a full day because of uncooperative weather. Things started well enough for the 11th-seeded German. This passing shot earned him the first set 7-5. But Gilbert refused to go away and at times even upstaged Stich, where the German makes his living, at the net. The match went to a 5th set. The much-maligned Gilbert, whose Grand Slam troubles are well documented, came through. He saved 2 match points and then in the deciding set tiebreak won all 7 points played and sent the 11th seed packing. Gilbert had supplied a major upset in week 1, but his joy was short-lived. He himself would be excused in round 4, rudely dismissed by Alexander Volkov. Michael Steek, meanwhile, was left to ponder what had gone wrong. The unexpected was not part of John McEnroe's game plan in a round 2 match with Diego Narciso, although Mac did raise some eyebrows by paying an unannounced visit to some courtside box seats. Narciso managed a set, but Mac had few problems as he high-stepped his way to a 4-set victory. Each time Narciso came up with his best, McEnroe answered with something better. Though John McEnroe may be a long way from the brash youngster who dominated tennis with his unique brand of artistry, at 33 he still summons clear reminders of a past he now struggles to relive. By the time it was over, Narciso was left looking for a place to hide, while Mac and his fans looked towards a Labor Day showdown with Jim Courier.
4-6, 6-3, 6-love, 6-2.
This match would be a huge obstacle in McEnroe's final attempt to leave his indelible mark on the tournament that has always meant so much to him since his days as a youngster growing up in nearby Douglaston. There, McEnroe measured his world from the Douglaston Club to the then site of the U.S. Open, the beautiful West Side Tennis Club.
When I grew up, it was at Forest Hills. It's a beautiful club, and I ball boyed there for a couple of years. So to be someone from Queens, live 15 minutes, and be brought up 15 minutes from here, it was a dream come true to be able to play and win here.
Back in 1979, Mac began a run of 3 straight Open championships.
Anytime you win the first time, that's great because that was the first major title I'd ever won, but it was a bit of a downer because I played a good friend of mine, Vitas Karolaitis, in the final, and both of us were from Queens, so it was a very strange situation for us, but anytime you win the first one, that's really what starts everything off. But the following year, I was able to beat Lendl, Connors, and Borg consecutively, so that was probably, in a way, the most memorable because I beat 3 great players in real tough matches.
It must have seemed like old times as fans eagerly awaited the most anticipated early round match of the 1992 U.S. Open, Connors versus Lendl. This was their 36th meeting. Polar opposites in style, each had abundant success as proof that their way worked best. Between them, 200 career singles titles and very little love lost.
Myself and Mac, we had a very special thing with Borg when he was playing, and we had a triangle there where the tennis and the excitement and the attitudes kind of all clashed. Lendl, in some way, was left out of there. I don't know if he was biding his time at that point of his career or not, or waiting for me to get old and McEnroe to kind of take a sabbatical and Borg to stop or what. But if he would have entered in and played, started playing his best tennis at that time and made a square instead of a triangle, we could have really had something special.
So this was prime time at the Open. A Friday night at the fights with a New York crowd ready to spur their main man on. In set 1, Connors didn't disappoint the masses, playing a brand of tennis more reminiscent of 1982 than 92. Connors was on the attack, taking aim at his first win over Lendl in 17 tries. Jimmy could do no wrong. This was set point. It was an auspicious sign for Connors, who was 89-1 at the Open when taking the opening stanza. One set in the bag, and with the crowd in a frenzy, Ivan Lendl had to know the early stages of set number 2 were crucial if he hoped to stem the Connors tide. To accomplish this, Lendl launched a barrage of slice backhands to Connors' forehand, Jimmy's weaker side, clearly planning to induce more unforced errors. Although the strategy would be a source of Connors' ridicule later, it worked to perfection. And when Connors offered Lendl the opening he needed, Lendl blasted through. Soon the sets were even at 1-1, and the momentum pendulum had swung squarely to Lendl's side. Even when he appeared down and out of a point, Ivan's creativity carried him through. Set 3 to Lendl, much to the satisfaction of wife Samantha. As the 4th set got underway, Connors did everything to ward off defeat, but what little he had left was sapped by points like this one. Unlike his opponent, Ivan Lendl never had established a true bond with the people. The stern resolve that is his trademark has always stood as a barrier between him and the outward affection of the U.S. Open crowds. In truth, it is that stern resolve and unyielding will that made Lendl the most dominant U.S. Open force of the 1980s. On this night, he came to Stadium Court and dismantled the people's choice. Lendl won 3-6, 6-3, 6-2, 6-love. Connors departed with a quick wave and then fired a parting shot at Lendl.
He doesn't play anything like he used to. Before, he used to come over that backhand. Now he's very satisfied with bunting the ball back, you know, which is different than the way he used to play. He used to come over the ball and just whack the ball from the baseline, and you know, I don't think he does that much anymore.
That's the way I have been playing against Jimmy for a long time now, and it has been working for me very well. I don't know, last 8 years or so, and I couldn't see any reason for change.
Even though it was over for 1991's hero, as Jimmy Connors disappeared into the night, it was clear that for tennis and its fans, Connors wins by just showing up. Although 2 tennis legends have now departed, fans at the '92 Open knew that the tournament was just heating up. Time to savor all the varieties of tennis life in New York.
It's like no other racket in the history of the sport.
The singles competition remained the focal point, but doubles was garnering its share of attention due to the exploits of the Wimbledon champions, John McEnroe and Michael Stich, who in a comeback win versus Sergio Casal and Emilio Sanchez demonstrated classic doubles style. The two put on a dazzling display of comeback victories until they succumbed to the eventual champions, Jim Grob and Richie Renneberg, winners of the '92 doubles title. Women's play was no less intriguing, as American Gigi Fernandez teamed with Natalia Zvereva to win their own U.S. Open title. The mixed doubles crown went to a duo from Down Under, Nicole Provis and Mark Woodford. Seniors and legends were also on display at the Open, and while they may not be as fit as they once were, players like Ilie Nastase have not lost any of their charisma.
Again, here.
And fans could also catch a glimpse of future stars like Brian Dunn of Florida, who went on to win the junior boys title. Fans can also opt for a midday siesta, but if they snoozed in the late afternoon of Day 5, they missed a stunning third-round development on the grandstand. The participants, Jennifer Capriati and Canadian Patricia He. In 3 prior meetings, He had failed to win a set, but on this day, she shocked America's darling. He painted the lines and sent Capriati scurrying all over the court. Even Jennifer's father, Stefano, had to acknowledge the effort of his daughter's opponent. He won the first set 7-5 and set her sights on delivering the tournament's second major upset on the women's legend. He fought to a 3-1 lead in set 2, and as word spread of Capriati's predicament, throngs of fans from the stadium rushed over for a glimpse. Capriati has not achieved her lofty status without sturdy survival instincts, and facing extinction, she battled back and knotted the set at 3. Though her fight never wavered, this was simply not Capriati's day, as she was sent reeling by an opponent at the top of her game. This was match point. A stunned Capriati waved goodbye. Once out of fan sight, the heart-wrenching pain of a U.S. Open dream gone awry became overbearing. Upsets were fast becoming the women's story. By the 4th round, nearly half of the seeded players had been eliminated, and if not for some neat trickery, number 4 seed Gabriela Sabatini may have been ambushed as well. Russian-born Natalia Zvereva, once a top 10 player, had her singles career become unglued at about the same time her country undertook radical reforms. But she pushed Sabatini hard in a long 3-set duel that was highlighted by numbing face-to-face combat. For Sabatini, the Open was only her second tournament in nearly 2 months, and she was forced to rely on emotion and perseverance to counteract match rustiness. While Zvereva possessed enough weapons to wound Sabatini, she never could muster enough for the kill. Sabatini lived on. Sabatini's high-wire act grew more risky in the quarterfinals, where she faced a longtime nemesis, Floridian Mary Jo Fernandez. Sabatini had used a 1990 win over Fernandez as a stepping stone on the way to her only Grand Slam title. In '92, Fernandez was hoping to do all the stepping. In the first set, Fernandez did more than step. She crushed Sabatini with pinpoint ground strokes. Mary Jo ran out the first 5 games of the match and the set, 6-2. But all good things come to an end, and in set 2, Sabatini answered Fernandez from the baseline loudly. But unlike the previous round, where she deflected enough of her opponent's offense to emerge with a win, Sabatini took a direct hit in this quarterfinal meeting. Fernandez, who in her career has had her share of success versus Gabriela, was once again the kiss of death for Sabatini as Mary Jo moved into the semifinals. Even an old reliable like Steffi Graf was left talking to herself about the topsy-turvy nature the women's draw had taken on. In her quarterfinal matchup with Arantxa Sanchez Vicario, Graf ran smack into a buzzsaw that showed no signs of shorting out. In round 4, Sanchez Vicario had annihilated the number 14 seed Zina Garrison, Love, and won. Now it was Graf's turn to try and slow down the hard-charging onslaught. She could not. Graf made 49 unforced errors, including this one on match point.
Game, center match.
For Arantxa, it was only her 3rd career win in 20 tries against Steffi, and it was worth a semifinal slot against Manuela Maleva-Franier. 1992 Player of the Year Monica Seles was hammering home that she was a worthy recipient of such a prestigious award. 4th round opponent Gigi Fernandez was barely on the court before she took a seat on the sidelines alongside Seles' prior victims. Monica wiped out the Olympic doubles champion in less than an hour and was one top woman who was steadfastly refusing to partake in the string of upsets. The unheralded seed slayer, Patricia He, was Monica Seles' opponent in the quarterfinals. He had eliminated Jennifer Capriati and 13th-ranked Helena Sikova, but began this match with a pair of double faults. Her biggest problems, though, would not be self-induced, as Seles pelted her with a full-throttle attack worthy of her championship status. Seles conquered a pesky virus, and He 6-1, 6-2. Seles has all the skills of a great athlete, but it is a refreshing approach that may be her championship secret.
You know, you can't think about the rankings. What if I lose this match? You know, how many bonus points will I lose or get? You know, you'll do this for so many years. And it's still a game, I think, because tennis is such a big business, you know, all the media, the sponsors, everything. People forget that, you know, and it still should be fun.
Seles' balanced mindset is uncommon in today's high-powered big business tennis world. Today's young players, like 16th seed Mary Pierce, all too often play in the shadow of a dominating parent who can seem oblivious to the pressure and heavy expectations their child bears.
Okay, ref, you don't have to call it.
After a round 2 Pierce win, it was noted, sadly, that for many of today's young stars, it is often difficult to tell after a match whether they won or lost. The mood of Asagi Stadium was brightened with superstar Andre Agassi's second primetime appearance in round 4 that began 2 hours late. By the time Agassi's match with Carlos Costa was complete, the tabloids had more than just rock and roll tennis to write about. Costa is a quality baseliner. Unfortunately for the 10th seed, the surface on which he excels is clay, not DecoTurf 2. The match's most dramatic moments came in set 1, where Agassi needed a handful of set points before capturing the opening stanza 6-4. The colorful Las Vegas native cruised through the next 2 sets more easily. He dropped only 5 more games the rest of the way. The night's most compelling news was to be found among the crowd, where superstar Barbra Streisand was taking in the main event with a special eye for a new friend.
He's very, very intelligent, very, very sensitive, very evolved, more than his, linear years. He's an extraordinary human being. He plays like a Zen master.
Andre mastered the Spaniard and cruised to his 11th straight Grand Slam match triumph. As week 2 got underway, Pete Sampras was just happy to still be around. In round 3, qualifier Todd Martin had taken Sampras to 5 sets before succumbing. The match, though, had left the number 3 seed's body ravaged. The last thing he needed was another 5-set marathon, but that's exactly what Frenchman Guy Forget presented to his American counterpart in the 4th round. The match was typical Sampras. At times he was a world beater, like in the initial set, which he won 6-3. Then in sets 2 and 3, he won only 2 games. An alarming figure for a player with one of the tour's most dominating serves. But the beauty of a 5-set match lies in its length. And provided a player continues to fight, momentum can swing often. As Sampras said after the match, he was not going to quit, and when he needed it, his game righted itself. For Forget, the day became one to forget, as Sampras survived in 5 sets. A particularly sweet victory against the man who defeated him in 1990 to clinch the Davis Cup tie for France.
Game, set, match, Sampras. 6-3, 1-6, 1-6, 6-4, 6-3.
As Stefan Edberg arrived for his 4th-round match, he hoped for a routine workday. Instead, he became another performer in a 5-set marathon. U.S. Open, overtime. Only 20 years old, Dutchman Richard Krajicek had used his big serve to become the youngest player to reach the 4th round. And throughout this match displayed shot-making that could make him a force in this decade. After falling behind 2-1, Krajicek won set 4 and gained a service break in the 5th. The Swede fired back. The battle raged on well past the 4-hour mark. Edberg was not ready to relinquish his title just yet. He regained the break and didn't stop. Of all the skills on display in this match, the one that grabbed your eye was the Krajicek serve. Its speed and accuracy was dazzling. But it was nothing that Stefan Edberg hadn't seen before. As this marathon played out, it became clear that there's more to tennis than a serve. And that this was a day of learning for Krajicek's future. The present, however, belonged to Edberg. On night 9 of this 2-week odyssey, these fans filed in anticipation of 2 terrific matches. It began on the grandstand, where the 4th seed Michael Chang faced the 14th seed Malavia Washington. Chang, who had not lost even a set coming into this match, continued his outstanding play as he won the first set easily, 6-2. But Washington was determined not to become another straight set victim. Aided by relentless cross-court forehands that continually stymied Chang, Washington won the next 2 sets and was nearing an upset victory. In this time of need, Chang looked to one of his strongest suits, his concentration. The former French Open champion rallied back. The fans on the grandstand that evening were witnessing an inspiring display of quickness, intensity, and emotion. After winning the 4th set, Chang raced into the 5th, where he more than once used his most enviable physical trait, speed, to send Washington reeling. Washington played valiantly, but Chang dominated the 5th set with hustle and determination, gaining a berth into the quarterfinals. As Chang held court in the grandstand, 2 formidable champions were locked up next door in the stadium, Yvonne Lendl and Boris Becker. In the 80s, Lendl had ruled Stadium Court. For 8 consecutive years, he reached the finals, winning 3 times. Boris Becker basked in the winner's circle in 1989, adding an open crown to his array of Wimbledon plates. This evening clash was billed as one of '92's marquee matchups, and once play began, one thing became obvious. There would be high-quality tennis played out during what promised to be a very long evening. Becker won set 1 in a tiebreak, but Lendl's piercing passing shots became much more elusive for the German in set 2. The advantage in set 3 was held by the crowd, witnesses to some extraordinary play, even by the standards of these 2 great players. By the 4-hour mark, the tension was visible with every scream, grunt, and grimace. Both players searching for what they were both so good at finding, the edge to win. This one was going 5, and one former U.S. Open champion would go down. At 12:43 in the morning, the decisive piece of the puzzle fell into place. Lendel's service break had rocked the German, who was left looking for help. He received none. Five hours, 1 minute after beginning, Lendl acknowledged victory, hardly aware that he had just won the longest U.S. Open match ever. During week 2, Jim Courier thought he could sneak in a private practice session in Central Park.
You can do it, you can do it.
As he is learning, the world's #1 player can sneak very little without being accompanied by some videotaping friends. On Labor Day, Courier met John McEnroe, who after 14 years as a professional, barely flinches when he sees a camera. As much as anything, the match was a barometer, measuring the difference between two champions of different eras. For McEnroe and his loyal followers, there were incredible reminders of the gifts with which this great player had graced the game. Unfortunately, points like these were few and very far between. Truth be told, McEnroe was brushed aside by a younger man who flashed a style very much in keeping with the present times: power tennis. Even fans lamenting McEnroe's difficult day found solace that on Labor Day he was beaten by a current star who embraces a work ethic that would make even many of the old guard pay tribute. This was match point. Courier 1 in 3.
7-6.
McEnroe's contribution to the game goes beyond measure. His imprint on American tennis a step further. However, his departure served more as a transition which would pave the way for a new youthful movement. With the older generation gone, someone very contemporary was waiting, and the level of American tennis would rise some more.
4, 3, 2, 1, and we're hot. We're up. And go, Joel.
It's a spectacular setting as we get ready for the main event of Day 10 and the Bright Tennis.
The stars of this showdown had attracted the attention and hype that had been missing throughout much of the tournament. And it was a match of differing styles, temperament, and dress. These one-time roommates would embark on a 4-hour journey, a journey which would display the skills that made Courier #1 Agassi a bankable star, and both of them eager champions. Courier's stoic presence and consistency would serve as the source of his strength. His 22 aces would keep Agassi's vaunted return of serve in check. Agassi, however, fell victim to his own weakness. A code violation cost him his focus and inevitably a few games. However, he managed to bear down and climb back into the match and would rally to take the second set in a tiebreaker. However, his concentration would wander once again. This time, Courier took advantage and turned Agassi's mental lapse into a third set blowout. Courier's momentum continued into the fourth, where he put an end to Agassi's quest. His victory had pushed him one step ahead of his rival, at least for now, and left fans wondering how this rivalry would develop in U.S. Opens of the future. As the final weekend approached, fans were treated to a delicious plateful of tennis action. First on the Night 11 menu was a quarterfinal match pitting the 12th seed, South African Wayne Ferreira, against Michael Chang. With both players hungry to advance to the semis, it was Chang who took the first bite and the first set. Ferreira, like Washington before him, would be no easy match for Chang. The players traded sets, with Ferreira gutting out the fourth despite his second U.S. Open injury in as many years. Last year, he couldn't play on. This year, he did, despite the pain. But in the fifth set, as his wounded opponent weakened, Chang grew stronger. The speed and intensity which has become Chang's trademark carried him to a spot in the U.S. Open semifinals. While the grandstand action was superb, Night 11's main course was served up on the stadium. Coming in, neither Stefan Edberg or coach Tony Picard could have fathomed how smoothly things would begin against longtime rival Ivan Lendl. For 2 sets, Edberg had things entirely his way, and he did not try to mask his exuberance. Distraught and staggered, Lendl dug in, desperate to stave off the knockout punch. In set 3, he was successful. But in set number 4, the Swede returned to the attack mode that had rendered Lendl helpless earlier in the match. Edberg collected enough match points to signal the end and then stalled. On the very edge of elimination, Lendl saved them all. This was the 4th. And it left Stefan Edberg muttering as he headed back to the baseline to try again. Amazingly, Lendl won the set 7-5. And if Edberg was frustrated, he must have been boiling when the rain came and postponed the completion of the match until the next day. With a semifinal spot at stake, the 27th career meeting between these two stars came down to a single set. And before it was over, a single inch would distinguish the winner from the man going home. Edberg attacked. Lendl responded. And Edberg attacked some more. Into the tiebreak they went, with the points even at 2. The tennis gods smiled at Edberg. The let cord was the impetus Edberg needed. Even those closest to Lendl could sense that. After match point, Edberg cleared the net by more than his pivotal shot and breathed a sigh of relief at finally closing out an opponent who seemed down and out more than 12 hours earlier, while Lendl offered a sarcastic overview of Edberg's future.
Who's going to win this tournament?
Not Edberg. He doesn't play the way he used to. He just punts the ball.
On the second Friday of the tournament, all attention focuses on the women's semifinals. The first pairing to take the court, Arantxa Sanchez-Vicario and Manuela Maleva-Franier. From the start, the quick and confident Spaniard overpowered and overwhelmed her anxious opponent. She controlled the points and pace throughout. Playing in her first semifinal at the U.S. Open, the 9th-seeded Maleva-Franier battled nerves as well as her rival's skillful tactics. Sanchez-Vicario's variety of weapons allowed Maleva-Franier little chance at establishing any rhythm. The mixture of shots sailing over the net kept a troubled Maleva off balance. Sanchez-Vicario's aggressive all-out hitting was just too much for Maleva-Franier as the 5th seed rolled over her enemy in straight sets. Maleva packed her bags while the 1989 French Open champion moved on to her 3rd Grand Slam final. For Monica Seles, it has become routine to wreak utter destruction on her U.S. Open opponents. On this semifinal day, Mary Jo Fernandez experienced the brunt of the Seles whirlwind. Fernandez had played good, consistent tennis throughout the championship, but her efforts paled in comparison to Seles, who had yet to lose a set in this 92 U.S. Open. Though she was being soundly beaten, Fernandez didn't go down as easily as most of Seles' opponents. Once again, Monica Seles had displayed the domination we've come to expect. As match point for Seles came again, we were treated to a prime example of her strength. And now, after 6 opponents had fallen, only Arantxa Sanchez Vicario stood between Monica Seles and the defense of her crown. It is the most prestigious day on the American tennis calendar, Super Saturday. A pair of men's semifinals wrapped around the women's final. First up, Stefan Edberg versus Michael Chang. As they took the court, they had barely an inkling that they were embarking on a match that began in late morning and stretched to late afternoon and would become the match of the 1992 U.S. Open. The obligatory early feeling out process soon gave way to the seesaw battle that would dominate the match. Late in set 1, Edberg recorded the day's first knockdown. But the American was hardly down and out. Chang dusted himself off, won set 1, and took the early advantage. Edberg, whose taxed body was on stadium court for the 3rd day in a row, rebounded to win set 2. And by the time both participants were consumed with set 3, it was clear that something special was dawning. So special that the respective families became caught up in the tension, though they showed it in different ways. On it went, a contrast in styles, Edberg staking claim to the net, daring Chang to hit it by him. Two sets to 1, Edberg. Back came Chang. The drama escalated. Chang elevated his game and for the 3rd match in a row backed Edberg into a precarious position. A 5th set and a 3-love lead for the American. Edberg was not impressed. Chang squandered his lead, but had one last great chance to extend the madness. Serving at 5-4 in the 5th, Edberg faced a critical break point and met the challenge like a champion. The crisis passed, and 2 points later, Edberg served at match point. After 5 hours, 26 minutes, he had won the U.S. Open's longest match ever and was 1 step away from defending his crown. He achieved something almost unthinkable, 3 consecutive wins after being down a break in the 5th and deciding set. All feats worth celebrating with Coach Tony Picard.
Anytime when you can come back from a break in the 5th set, it's a good effort, I think. But to do it 3 matches in a row, it's extremely good. I don't think many players can do that, and I think that proves a lot that I at least got good character, and I'm fighting out there.
Monica Seles and Arantxa Sanchez Vicario must have felt like caged animals unleashed after the 5+ hours of captivity they had spent waiting to take the center stage for their championship match. Once in the stadium, however, only one of the women finalists showed much roar. Not surprisingly, it was Monica Seles. By tournament end, Seles had exhausted every synonym for brilliance, and on this day she capped a tournament run that made the gap between her and all others seem cavernous. In 7 victories, the world's #1 spent a grand total of 7 hours, 11 minutes taking care of business. She won 14 straight sets. As the afternoon wore on, the sun shone brightly on women's best. Seles' second U.S. Open title was her 7th Grand Slam win in 8 finals. Meanwhile, Sanchez Vicario, to her credit, showed championship caliber resolve. Though she had little to celebrate, she was able to turn a pair of lopsided sets into respectable scores. This was match point, and predictably it ended with a Seles winner. Championship to Monica Seles, 6-3, 6-3. Pete Sampras and Jim Courier. 2 Americans poised and determined to win in Super Saturday's finale. It was Sampras who played outstanding tennis early on, actually dominating the top-seeded Courier throughout the first set, which he won handily 6-1. Courier, playing as he had throughout this U.S. Open, battled back to win the second set. But from that point forward, not even the cool of the evening could help Jim Courier find relief from the high degree of success from this former U.S. Open champion. All aspects of Sampras' multifaceted game were working well as he pressed the action and cruised to an easy third set victory, 6-2. As Sampras built a commanding lead in the fourth set, his victory seemed imminent. But as the match's end neared, Sampras was suddenly afflicted by a stomach ailment. Doubled over in pain, Sampras struggled to complete his victory. This was match point. As he struggled to reach the net for the customary handshake, Sampras' status for the next day's final was left very much in doubt. He ran off the court, headed for the trainer's room, and would not emerge for 3 hours. 128 players began the quest, but only Pete Sampras and Stefan Edberg had earned the right to play for America's most coveted tennis prize. Pre-match talk focused on the physical condition of Sampras, who continued to battle a virus that struck during the later stages of his semifinal win. It was a duel of the last 2 U.S. Open champions, and if both were on their games, it would be a battle between a pair of hard-charging players who would race to control the net. A packed stadium crowd watched intently, looking for early signs that Sampras was still ailing, but he showed no ill effects in set 1, which he won. As was his calling card at this year's championship, Edberg was behind and was less than enamored with the prospect of having to make another dramatic comeback. In set 2, the sellout crowd saw the real Stefan Edberg. Unquestionably the game's best volleyer, Edberg put on a clinic in net play. He stabbed at balls, cut off the angles, and evened the sets at 1 apiece. Set 3 was pivotal, especially for Sampras, who, as he later admitted, was feeling less than his best. He wanted a quick match with short points and pushed to ensure that. All Edberg and his Swedish fans wanted was to win. The third set went to a tiebreak, where Edberg left a disconsolate Sampras shaking his head. The fourth set became a formality. This was match point. Though the road had been bumpy, Stefan Edberg had defended his crown and did it with a hearty dose of perseverance and guts. A touch of irony, for it was once said that that is exactly what he did not have, and that he could not survive the rigors of the U.S. Open. The U.S. Open of 1992 closed as had the one before, and in distinctly different ways, Stefan Edberg and Monica Seles showed that they possess all that is needed to return to New York, battle the distractions, overcome their opponents, and succeed in defense of the crown.